All right, so you want to really get into this whole Andrew Tate thing, like deeper than just the headlines, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We got articles, interviews, pieces of his book even. We're going to deep dive into, like, who is this guy?
I think it's
What's the deal?
it's fascinating like how much material is out there,
It's a lot tea.
and how people have such strong opinions. Love him or hate him, not much in between.
So to get past just the surface stuff, got to
Yeah.
look at, like, what's at the core of what he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with the persona.
Right.
This image he puts out there.
Right.
Kickboxing champ,
Mhm.
millionaire, webcam studio owner.
He definitely plays that up.
Big time. Why? What's the strategy there?
It's all about credibility.
Right.
Like, he's not just talking. He's saying, look, I've done this stuff.
I walk the walk.
Exactly. And that stuff, it's all like peak masculine achievement.
So it's a powerful message,
Mm-hmm.
especially, I'd imagine, for young guys looking for a model, someone to emulate.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, but there's a lot of flash, too.
Mhm.
Fast cars, the lifestyle, talking about lots of girlfriends.
Right, right.
It almost feels like, I don't know, is it genuine confidence or is it all kind of crafted to get attention?
That's the question, isn't it? Maybe both. But you can't deny it works. He's got millions of followers eating this up.
This whole image of wealth, power, and being super masculine, no apologies.
Right.
Okay, so let's get into those core ideas. Masculinity, money, and control. They seem all tied together for him.
Absolutely.
Like for Tate, being a man isn't just being strong. It's about dominating, controlling everything, being super successful.
Mm-hmm.
And money is like the proof of that success, right? How much you're worth as a man.
Exactly.
But then he takes it further. He says men need to control their emotions, their surroundings, even the women in their lives.
And that's where things get really controversial.
Yeah.
He's got this very transactional view of relationships and how he talks about women. It can be really demeaning,
Like they're obstacles in a man's path to getting rich and powerful.
basically. And that's a very narrow, arguably misogynistic perspective.
So we've got this picture. Hypermasculine, super successful alpha male.
Hmm.
But how do you get there, according to him? What's the plan?
Oh, he's all about hard work and discipline. Like waking up early, training for hours, always pushing yourself.
A hustle, the grind, never stop.
Exactly. He romanticizes that whole thing.
And he's big on cutting out distractions too, right? No
Yeah.
video games, too much hanging out. Even female friends are off limits.
Yeah. Anything that doesn't directly help you get richer, he sees as a waste of time.
It's pretty extreme. Black and white thinking.
For sure. But that's also kind of why some people are drawn to him. It's a clear path, a set of rules to follow.
In a world that can feel really chaotic,
Right.
he talks about this G mindset a lot.
Mm-hmm.
What is that exactly, and how does it fit into all this?
So the G mindset is all about believing in yourself, like unshakably. You're destined for greatness no matter what.
Overcoming doubt, ignoring negativity, just going after your goals relentlessly.
Yeah, pretty much.
But isn't there a risk there? Like, could that tip over into arrogance? Delusion, even?
It's a fine line. He wants his followers to be confident, almost cocky. He says doubt is like a weakness, a disease.
But for some guys, that might be really empowering. But for others, it could be toxic.
Absolutely.
Like this sense of entitlement, not seeing your own flaws.
Right.
And he sees depression and anxiety as weaknesses too, right?
Yeah.
Like just snap out of it and be positive.
Yeah, and that's a big problem. He really oversimplifies mental health issues,
Dismissing them as a lack of character.
which can be really harmful, especially for young men who might be struggling and looking for real help.
So we've got this picture of the self-made guy, all ambition, driven by the G mindset. But how does he see the world itself?
Oh, he's super critical of Western society, like modern Western culture.
Sees it as weak, decadent, too focused on political correctness.
Yeah, he thinks it's made men soft, robbed them of their natural drive.
And he compares it to places like Eastern Europe, Dubai, right?
Where he says traditional masculinity is still valued.
Men can be dominant and assertive, no problem.
Right. It's kind of a romanticized view, though,
Ignoring the problems those places have.
Yeah, but it's a powerful message for men who feel alienated by the modern world.
Like he's offering this simpler, more traditional way of life. Men in charge, women knowing their place.
Mm-hmm.
He even says Western civilization is going to collapse, maybe because of Islam or more traditional societies.
That's where things get really apocalyptic.
He's tapping into people's fears about cultural change, right?
Yeah, and he's got this us versus them story that gets people riled up.
He's a master of pushing buttons, getting people talking.
For sure.
But is it all an act? Is he really this extreme, or is this a character he plays?
That's the big question, isn't it?
He's obviously smart, charismatic, he knows how to market himself.
But it's hard to know where the persona stops and the real Andrew Tate begins.
There's a lot more to unpack here. His book gets into his own experiences, relationships, even his views on happiness and stuff.
And it's in those details that we might start to see, like the contradictions, the real person behind the image.
He's not just a cartoon villain, he's a human being with his own story, his own motivations, good and bad.
Right.
So let's dig into those personal stories and see what we find. We'll pick this up in part 2.
Back again, picking up where we left off. That whole contrast, Tate's image versus maybe a more complex guy underneath.
Right. To get there, got to go past the, big picture ideas and the nitty-gritty stories he tells, specific stuff from the Tate Bible.
So there's this part, he gives 50 pieces of advice for men. Some are pretty standard self-help type stuff.
But others, less so.
Definitely. He tells guys to retire their mothers.
Sounds nice at first glance, taking care of family.
Exactly. Plays on that. But in Tate's world, it's not just about mom being comfortable. It's about you being so successful.
You're above needing anyone, even your parents.
Exactly. Fits that whole self-made, hyper-independent thing he pushes.
Then there's this weird one. Work for a week, give all the money away. Doesn't that clash with the whole wealth is everything thing?
Yeah, it's kind of head-scratching. But he says it detaches you from money, makes you see it as a tool, not the goal.
He even says give it to a dog charity.
Right.
Which, given how much he talks about dogs.
Right. It's like this recurring theme. Dogs are pure, loyal, qualities he doesn't seem to find much in people, especially women.
Speaking of messy human stuff, there's that bit about forgiveness. But then, right after, advice on ruthless revenge.
Gotta love the extremes with Tate. No in between. Total forgiveness or destroy your enemy. Very conquer or be conquered.
And he's not just talking. He's pretty open about violence, even glorifies it sometimes.
Whole chapter on violence. He says it's unavoidable part of life. Uses his kickboxing to make the point.
Like the world's this constant fight, and being the toughest is all that matters.
And for some guys, that really hits home. The ones who feel powerless, maybe bullied, being able to handle any threat is appealing.
Gives them a sense of control they don't have otherwise.
Right.
Okay, back to Tate himself. He talks a lot about his brother, Tristan. Seemed super close.
Yeah, that bond is huge for him. He says Tristan's always been there, supporting him, challenging him.
Loyal, strong. He even says they share bank accounts.
That's some serious trust. They see their success as a team effort, like they built their own little empire separate from everyone else.
But even they argue. There's this story about a watch. Tristan bought a fancy one when they were still broke. Tate flipped out.
Shows you how focused Tate is on money, on not wasting it. But he admits later, Tristan had a point. Sometimes you gotta enjoy the wins.
Shows even Tate can change his mind. There's not always one right way.
And it shows you need people who challenge you. Even if it causes arguments, different viewpoints make you grow.
They definitely have that. Always pushing each other, debating.
And it's interesting, they both have this very traditional view of masculinity. Says something about how they were raised, maybe.
He mentions their dad a little.
Yeah.
Chess master, A&D professional wrestler. What a combo.
It's that duality we see in Tate himself, the brainy chess player. But T also the fighter who wants to dominate physically.
Maybe it's inherited, that mix of brains and brawn.
Could be.
He says as a kid, he was surrounded by nerds and calculators. Like he always felt different, more ambitious.
That outsider thing is key to how people see him. He's the guy who doesn't fit in, rejects the rules.
Appeals to people who feel the same way. The rebels, the nonconformists.
Yeah.
And get this, he was a chess champ as a kid too. State champion. Shows he's always been competitive.
Always wants to win, be the best, dominate, whether it's boxing, business, even relationships.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room, his views on women. He's very open about believing men should control them.
And he even gives specific advice on how to do it.
It's rough. He talks about putting women in check, instructing them, using money to motivate them.
It's like they're possessions to be controlled, not people. And that's seriously messed up.
There's even a whole section, Laws of the Pimp Game.
No.
Which is, he talks about running a webcam studio, managing the women.
It's that transactional view of relationships on full display. He brags about manipulating them, making them dependent on him.
He says women are inherently lazy, need a man to tell them what to do to succeed.
Ugh, yeah. And we got to be clear, that kind of thinking is harmful. It reinforces stereotypes, this power dynamic of control.
It's not healthy, it's not ethical. One of the most dangerous parts of his message, for sure.
Especially because he makes it sound like it's necessary for success. Like controlling women is how men achieve their goals.
So manipulative.
Totally plays on insecurities and how society conditions people.
And his webcam studio stuff. That doesn't sound ethical at all.
Nope. Exploiting vulnerable women for money is never okay. And him trying to make it sound empowering, it's disturbing.
Classic abuser tactic, twisting the story to avoid blame.
For sure.
He even compares regular bosses to pimps. Says they exploit people for less money than he did.
It's what people do when they're trying to justify bad behavior. Point fingers elsewhere to downplay their own actions.
Avoid taking responsibility.
Exactly.
We see that a lot in the book. Any criticism, he just calls people haters or losers who are jealous of him.
It's a way to shut down discussion, avoid actually addressing the harmful stuff. We got to see through that.
He's also big on this off-the-grid living.
Yeah.
Seems tied to his distrust of government, wanting to be free.
He talks about multiple passports, licenses, bank accounts all over the world. Like he's always running from something.
He even brags about speeding and using his different IDs to get out of trouble. That's got to be risky, maybe even illegal.
Super reckless. Shows he thinks rules don't apply to him. Money and status put you above the law.
But is it really about freedom? Or is it about avoiding consequences, staying in control?
Good question. And his version of freedom is all about him, not about helping others or doing good.
Very different from someone who wants social justice, that kind of thing.
Big time. And remember, this is just scratching the surface of Andrew Tate. The Tate Bible is dense, makes you think.
About masculinity, success, what it all means.
We've got more to cover. His thoughts on happiness, what a good life is, his critiques of education, the media. We'll keep going in part 3.
Okay, so we've really gone deep on Tate's whole deal. The good, the bad, just plain weird. But one thing that keeps popping up in his book, this Tate Bible, is legacy. Like it seems even bigger than money or being famous for him.
It is interesting, yeah. He's got all this wealth, influence, but he talks about being remembered for more than that, like actually changing the world.
He even says guys shouldn't worry too much about being happy. Chasing good feelings just distracts you from achieving great things.
Gets his whole thing, right? Self-control, discipline. Real fulfillment comes from purpose, from striving for something bigger than yourself.
Building a business, making history, passing on knowledge, that kind of stuff. There's this part. He says he'd give up everything he owns just to see his dad again. Kind of gets you, right?
Yeah.
Like a glimpse of the real guy under all that toughness.
It does. Even someone who seems to have it all still deals with loss, regret, trying to find meaning. Makes him human, even if you disagree with like almost everything he does.
He also talks about retiring in your 30s. Not like sitting on a beach, but being financially free to pursue your passions.
Reaching that level where you're not working for money anymore, you can create something meaningful. Art, charity, mentoring, whatever.
But isn't that like a super privileged idea?
Yeah.
Most people can't even fathom retiring that young, let alone having the kind of money he talks about.
Yeah, it can feel out of touch for sure. Like he's talking from a different planet where everyone's rich and driven.
But it's interesting, he's so big on mentorship too. Finding older, successful guys to guide you, share wisdom.
Goes back to that lineage thing. Passing down knowledge through generations. Crucial for men, he says.
But that's also kind of risky, right? What if those mentors have bad ideas, bad values?
You got to be careful. Definitely. Blindly following anyone, even if they're successful, can lead you down a bad path. You got to think critically, make your own WN choices based on what you believe.
He also talks about surrounding yourself with like-minded people, sharing goals, ambitions. He calls it your tribe or war council.
Like a support system, pushing you to be your best. It's a common idea in self-improvement circles.
But it can also turn into an echo chamber,
Yeah.
right? Everyone agreeing all the time, you lose perspective.
Exactly. Got to expose yourself to different ideas, even if they make you uncomfortable. That's how you grow, challenge your own beliefs, avoid getting stuck in one narrow way of thinking.
So, after all this, the philosophy, the stories, the controversies, who is Andrew Tate?
Man, he's a tough one to figure out. He's clearly smart, driven, understands how people think, especially when it comes to like marketing and getting people to believe him.
But he's also got major issues. His views on women are like straight up misogynistic, and some of his rhetoric is really dangerous.
It's like he's full of contradictions. Preaches self-improvement but encourages toxic behavior. Talks about legacy but seems obsessed with fame and being validated.
He's a master manipulator who built his fortune exploiting people, playing on their fears.
But he's also a product of the world we live in. He speaks to a lot of young men who feel lost, angry, left behind.
And he gives them this simple, even if it's harmful, answer to their problems.
Yeah.
A way to feel powerful in a world that feels increasingly unfair and confusing.
Right.
So as we wrap up this whole deep dive,
Yeah.
what do we want our listeners to take away from this? What should they do with all this information?
I think the most important thing is don't just take what he says at face value. Think critically.
Question everything.
There are some good ideas mixed in there, but they're often tied to some really messed up stuff.
You got to recognize the dangers of his message while also trying to understand why it's so appealing to some people. It's about having tough conversations, challenging those harmful beliefs, and choosing a different path for yourself.
A path built on respect, empathy, actually wanting to make the world better.
And remember, this is just a starting point. Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep challenging your own beliefs. That's how you grow. There's always more to learn.
Exactly. It's a lifelong journey.